The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Hodgins' law office, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Catherine Kate Addison stood by the window, one hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly, the other absently twisting the gold wedding band she still wore. Outside, rain began to fall on the small town of Riverdale, Wisconsin, drops catching the light like scattered diamonds before disappearing into the earth. "Sometimes loss opens new doors," Kate whispered, repeating words her grandfather Joseph had once told her. At 38, she hadn't expected to be starting over, pregnant with her second child through IVF, raising her 5-year-old son alone after losing her husband David to a military operation 2 years ago. Yet here she was, waiting for the reading of her grandfather's will, with a strange sense that something momentous was about to unfold. Behind her, 5-year-old Jamie sat cross-legged on the floor, his small fingers buried in the golden fur of Scout, their aging retriever. The dog's tail thumped lazily against the hardwood as the child whispered secrets into his ear. Kate watched them, finding comfort in their easy companionship. The door to the inner office opened, and Walter Hodgins, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a solemn demeanor, gestured for Kate to join the others. "We're ready to begin," he said quietly. Inside, Kate's relatives sat in a semicircle of leather chairs. Richard, her 50-year-old cousin, scrolling through emails on his phone. Elaine, the 45-year-old middle school teacher who'd always been kind but distant. Aunt Martha, 75 and ramrod straight despite her age, and Uncle Robert, 70, with Joseph's same weather-beaten hands and distant gaze. Kate lowered herself carefully into the remaining chair, folding her hands over her rounded belly as Walter began to read. The room seemed to close in around her as he methodically distributed Joseph Addison's 300-acre farm and possessions. Richard received the main house and half the acreage. Elaine inherited the remaining land and agricultural equipment. Aunt Martha got the investment portfolio. Uncle Robert was given the collection of vintage cars Joseph had lovingly restored. As Walter closed the leather portfolio, Kate realized her name had never been mentioned. She, who had spent every summer at the farm since she was 8, who had sat with Joseph during his final days, had received nothing. "Is that all?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Walter nodded. "That concludes the formal will." Outside the law office, the rain had intensified. Jamie splashed in a puddle, Scout watching with elderly patience, while Kate stood motionless, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen displayed a notification from her apartment management. Eviction notice. Building sold to Evergreen Estates. 30 days to vacate. Kate closed her eyes, feeling the baby kick inside her. One loss after another, and now she had 30 days to find a new home for herself, Jamie, Scout, and the baby girl she would soon welcome into the world. "You okay?" Richard approached, keys jingling in his hand. "Just peachy," Kate replied, not bothering to hide the hurt in her voice. "Homeless and apparently forgotten." Richard shifted uncomfortably. Grandpa Joseph had his reasons for everything. Never knew what they were half the time, but they were there. Kate nodded, watching Jamie laugh as he jumped in another puddle. "I'm going to visit the farm once more before you take over, to say goodbye." The gravel driveway leading to the Addison farm crunched beneath the tires of Kate's weathered SUV. The 300 acres spread out before her, rolling fields, the old red barn, the 2-story farmhouse where Joseph had lived for over 60 years. Beyond them all, barely visible through the morning mist, lay the forested area Kate had always called the old place, where Joseph had told her the original Addison homestead stood. Jamie unbuckled himself and was out of the car before she could stop him. Scout bounding after him with surprising energy for a dog his age. "Jamie, stay where I can see you," Kate called, easing herself out of the driver's seat. The farmhouse door stood open. Joseph had never locked it in life. and apparently no one had started now that he was gone. Inside, the familiar scent of pine soap and old books wrapped around Kate like an embrace. She trailed her fingers over the worn kitchen table where she and Joseph had shared countless breakfasts, the man teaching her to read weather patterns in the sky, telling stories of Addison ancestors who had worked this land for generations. "What were you trying to tell me, Grandpa?" she whispered to the empty room. "Why leave me nothing when you knew I loved this place as much as you did?" Outside, Jamie's excited voice called, "Mom! Mom! Come see what Scout found!" Kate hurried as quickly as her pregnant body allowed, following Jamie's voice to the old equipment shed. Inside, Scout was pawing enthusiastically at the ground beside an antique plow covered with a canvas tarp. "Scout, stop that!" Kate scolded gently, but the dog continued digging with determined focus. "Look, Mom!" Jamie pointed to something gleaming in the freshly disturbed earth. "Treasure!" Kate knelt awkwardly, brushing away soil to reveal a small metal compartment built into the underside of the plow. It had been painted to match, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. With trembling fingers, she worked the simple latch. Inside lay a waterproof pouch containing 3 items: a brass key with the number 184 engraved on it, a sealed envelope with Kate's name written in Joseph's distinctive handwriting, and a faded photograph of a young Joseph standing beside a beautiful dark-haired woman holding an infant. On the back in faded ink, "Joseph, Rebecca, and baby Caroline, 1955. Kate stared at the photo, confusion spreading through her. Her grandmother's name had been Margaret. Joseph and Margaret had married in 1958, and their first child, Kate's mother, wasn't born until 1960. Who was Rebecca, and who was Caroline? The letter in her hand suddenly felt as heavy as stone. "My dearest Katie, if you're reading this, you found what I hoped you would. Some stories are too complicated to tell in life, but too important to take to the grave. The key opens Safety Deposit Box 184 at First State Bank in town. Helen Patterson knows you're coming. What you find there will help you understand why I couldn't include certain things in my will. The choice of what to do with this information is yours, but I trust you to do what's right. You've always understood the farm better than anyone." With love beyond words, Grandpa Joseph Kate folded the letter carefully, her mind racing. She helped Jamie back into the car, tucking the precious items into her purse. As they drove away, she glanced in the rear-view mirror at the farm receding behind them. For the first time since the will reading, she felt something other than hurt, a flutter of anticipation, like the first notes of a song long forgotten. Who were you, Joseph Addison, and what secrets did you take to your grave? Frank Miller's cottage sat at the edge of Riverdale, surrounded by towering oak trees in a garden that seemed determined to reclaim the entire property. At 75, the retired attorney moved slowly, but his mind remained razor sharp. He welcomed Kate with genuine warmth, chuckling as Jamie immediately took off after a trio of cats sunning themselves on the back porch. "Scout, stay with Jamie," Kate instructed before turning to Frank. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Frank settled into a worn armchair, motioning for Kate to sit. "Joseph told me you might come around after the will reading. Said you were the clever one." Kate placed the photograph on the coffee table between them. "Clever enough to find this. Who were they, Frank? Rebecca and Caroline?" Frank's weathered hand reached for the photo, a soft sigh escaping him. "Rebecca Miller. My cousin, actually. She and Joseph met when he was stationed in California after Korea. Married in 54. Caroline was born in 55. What happened to them? Rebecca died in a car accident in 56, hit-and-run driver. Joseph was devastated, still in the service with a baby he couldn't care for alone. Rebecca's parents offered to raise Caroline. And he just gave her up?" Frank's gaze drifted to the window where Jamie was giggling as a calico cat batted playfully at his shoelaces. "Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go." The words hung in the air between them. Kate placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move within her. After David died, many had questioned her decision to have another child through IVF, to deliberately choose single motherhood again. But she had known, bone deep, that this child was meant to be part of her family, regardless of the challenges ahead. "I understand that choice," Kate said softly. "When I decided to have this baby after David died, everyone thought I was crazy. 'Why make your life harder?' they asked. But sometimes the heart knows what it needs, even when the mind can't explain it." Frank nodded. Exactly what Joseph would have said. He understood the difference between what looks reasonable and what feels right. "Joseph came back to Wisconsin after his discharge," Frank continued. "The farm was struggling, his father ill. The Millers provided stability for Caroline. Disrupting her life seemed selfish. So he made the hardest choice a parent can make. And then he met my grandmother." Frank nodded. "Margaret brought light back into his life. They built something beautiful together. But he never forgot Caroline. Set up a trust fund for her, received updates and photos from the Millers throughout the years. Why keep it secret all this time? The longer a secret is kept, the harder it becomes to tell." Frank's eyes held a lifetime of understanding. By the time it might have felt safe to reveal the truth, decades had passed. "How do you tell your wife and children they've been living with only half the story?" Kate left Frank's house with more questions than answers, but a clearer sense of direction. As she buckled Jamie into his car seat, she glanced up to see a familiar vehicle parked across the street. Richard's gleaming black SUV. At the gas station on the outskirts of town, Richard confronted her directly. "What did Joseph hide for you to find?" His voice was tight, his posture defensive. "How did you know he hid anything?" "I overheard him talking to Frank last month. Something about Katie finding the truth when the time was right." Richard ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, Evergreen Estates is offering $20 million for the farm. They want to build a luxury resort and golf course. It's a good deal, Kate. Whatever Joseph set aside secretly, we should discuss it as a family." Kate studied her cousin's face, seeing not greed but desperation. "What's going on, Richard?" The facade crumbled. Richard leaned against his SUV, shoulders sagging with a weight Kate hadn't noticed before. "I'm drowning in debt," he confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "Bad investments, market crash. I remortgaged my house to keep the business afloat, maxed out credit cards for Margaret's college tuition." He looked away, ashamed. "The farm sale is my last chance to avoid bankruptcy. My daughter's future, my retirement, everything's gone if this deal falls through." Kate was silent, absorbing this new understanding of her cousin's position. Not a villain, just a man trying to protect his family from his own mistakes. "I need to understand what Joseph was planning first," Kate said carefully. "Give me a few days." Richard nodded reluctantly. "Don't take too long. Evergreen wants an answer by next week." First State Bank was a single-story brick building that had anchored Riverdale's main street for over a century. Inside, Kate asked for Helen Patterson. The elderly woman who emerged from a back office had bright eyes and a welcoming smile. "You must be Catherine," she said, extending a hand. "You have his eyes, you know. Same way of looking at things like you're seeing beyond the surface." In a private room, Helen used her key alongside Kate's to open Safety Deposit Box 184. Inside lay a collection of documents, photographs, and letters, all meticulously organized. Kate discovered the marriage certificate for Joseph and Rebecca, Caroline's birth certificate, adoption papers, and trust fund documentation showing monthly deposits since 1957. Most surprising was a separate deed for 40 acres of the original Addison homestead. The land containing the first family home and the family cemetery, legally separated from the main farm decades ago and placed in trust for Caroline Miller. He kept this land separate because it contains the headwaters of Riverdale Creek, Helen explained. The largest clean aquifer in the county runs beneath it. Joseph understood its value long before others did. As Kate processed this information, the door opened abruptly. James Davidson, the bank's new president, entered with an insincere smile. Finding everything in order, Ms. Addison? Old trusts and property deeds can be quite complex. I'd be happy to have our legal team review them. That won't be necessary, Kate replied, gathering the documents. Davidson's smile tightened. With properties changing hands, especially valuable farmland, we like to ensure all documentation is current and valid. I understand Evergreen Estates has expressed interest in the Addison property. After Davison left, Helen leaned forward, her voice low. Be careful. Davison sits on Evergreen's local advisory board. Many in town are invested in that resort happening. Kate returned to her motel room that evening to find the door slightly ajar, her belongings searched. Nothing was missing, but the message was clear. Someone was looking for Joseph's documents. Sheriff Reynolds appeared at her door minutes later. Though he claimed to be responding to a complaint from Davidson about unauthorized document removal, his true purpose soon became evident. Listen, Kate, he said quietly after ensuring they weren't overheard. Joseph and I went to school together. I knew about Rebecca. I was the one who called him when she had the accident. Then you know about Caroline, the 40 acres. Reynolds nodded grimly. Evergreen isn't just after the farm for a resort. Those 40 acres sit atop the largest aquifer in the county. That water is worth more than the land itself these days. Whoever controls it controls future development for miles around. Kate placed a protective hand over her belly. Why would Joseph leave this for me to find instead of just telling me? He was protecting you, giving you plausible deniability until you were ready to decide what to do. Reynolds adjusted his hat. Joseph always said you were the only one who truly understood the meaning of the farm beyond its cash value. That night, lying awake in her motel room with Jamie asleep beside her and Scout curled at their feet, Kate reflected on the parallels between her life and Caroline's. Both had lost parents. Caroline through death and separation, Kate through her mother's early death and father's emotional absence. Both had been shaped by losses beyond their control. And now their lives were mysteriously connected through Joseph's final act. The baby kicked inside her, a reminder of life's persistence even in the face of loss. Kate placed her hand over the movement, whispering, We'll figure this out, little one, I promise. The agricultural campus of the University of Wisconsin buzzed with activity as Kate made her way to the Sustainable Farming Department. Following directions from the department secretary, she found Professor Olivia Miller's office tucked away in a corner of the historic building. Olivia Miller was 35, with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Her office walls displayed soil composition maps and vintage farming photographs. Jamie immediately gravitated to the terrarium of earthworms on a side table, while Scout settled contentedly at Olivia's feet as if they were old friends. Your dog has excellent taste, Olivia smiled, scratching behind Scout's ears. Now, how can I help save your family farm from developers? Kate explained the situation without revealing their potential family connection. The land has historical significance and a critical water source. I'm looking for alternatives to selling to Evergreen, ways to preserve the heritage while addressing my cousin's financial needs. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Agricultural heritage centers can be economically viable with the right approach. Farm-to-table dining experiences, educational programs, seasonal festivals. These create sustainable revenue while preserving the land's character. As Olivia outlined potential strategies, Kate found herself drawn to a framed photograph on the bookshelf. An elderly man and a young girl examining plants in a garden. With a jolt, she recognized Joseph, though much older than in the safety deposit box photo. "Who's that?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Oh, that's me with Mr. Addison, an old family friend. He used to visit every summer when I was growing up. Taught me everything I know about soil conservation." Olivia smiled fondly. "Strange coincidence that you're trying to save the Addison farm. Small world." Not coincidence, Kate thought. Connection? Kate, Jamie, and Scout explored the 40 acres of original homestead land with Olivia the following day. The property contained a well-preserved two-story farmhouse, a stone barn, and most importantly, the natural spring that fed Riverdale Creek. Inside the old house, Kate discovered Joseph's journal, its pages filled with observations about the land, weather patterns, and philosophical reflections spanning decades. The final entry, dated just weeks before his death, caught her breath. "The water remembers. It carries our stories from mountain to sea, generation to generation. I've done what I can to protect this place. Now I must trust that Katie will find the path I've left and have the courage to follow it." "This spring water is remarkably pure," Olivia noted, examining samples she'd collected. "You can see why Evergreen wants it. Climate projections show this region facing increased drought cycles. Whoever controls these water rights essentially controls future development for miles around." Kate watched Jamie and Scout playing near the creek, the afternoon sun filtering through ancient cottonwood trees. "So how do we save it?" Before Olivia could answer, a rental car appeared on the gravel drive. A woman in her late 60s emerged, her silver-streaked dark hair and determined chin immediately reminding Kate of the young woman in the photograph with Joseph. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Olivia called, surprised. "I thought you weren't coming until next week." The woman, Caroline, stood frozen, taking in the landscape with visible emotion. "I couldn't wait any longer," she said softly. "Not after your call." Kate stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Kate Addison. Joseph was my grandfather." Caroline studied her face. "You have his eyes, the same way of looking at things." Inside the farmhouse over cups of tea, Caroline explained that she had always known Joseph was her biological father. Her adoptive parents, the Millers, had been open about it from the beginning and had facilitated letters and occasional visits after she became an adult. "After your grandmother Margaret died in 2005, we began meeting more regularly," Caroline explained. "He would visit California, supposedly fishing with old army buddies." "Why didn't he tell us?" Kate asked. "The longer a secret is kept, the harder it becomes to share," Caroline replied, echoing Frank's words. "By then, he'd built an entire life separate from me. We decided the truth might cause more pain than healing." Olivia sat in stunned silence as her mother revealed their connection to the Addisons. "So this land, this spring, it's part of our heritage too?" "According to the deed Joseph left, these 40 acres legally belong to you, Caroline," Kate confirmed. "He separated them from the main farm decades ago, knowing their importance to the watershed. The revelation created an instant bond between the three women, transcending the secrets and separations of the past. Together with Frank and Sheriff Reynolds, they developed a plan to present at the town council meeting where Evergreen's zoning request would be decided. In the days that followed, Kate made a surprising discovery in Joseph's study: medical records showing he had been diagnosed with heart disease 6 months before his death, giving him time to carefully arrange everything, from the separate trust for the 40 acres to the hidden key that would lead Kate to Caroline. He knew he was dying, Kate realized. He was making sure his legacy would be protected, not just the land, but the family connections he couldn't acknowledge in life. Olivia created a detailed proposal for the Addison Heritage Center, combining sustainable agriculture, water conservation, and educational programs. The plan included selling conservation easements for the water rights to environmental foundations, generating immediate capital to address Richard's debt while preserving long-term family control. "This could work," Kate said, reviewing the numbers. But will Richard agree? The town council chamber was packed when Kate arrived with Jamie, Scout, Caroline, and Olivia. Richard sat alone near the front, tension evident in his rigid posture. Davidson and the Evergreen representatives occupied the front row, their polished appearances contrasting with the weathered faces of local farming families filling the remaining seats. Mayor Jenkins called the meeting to order, explaining that while public comments would be heard, the agenda focused specifically on zoning changes required for Evergreen's proposed resort. Davidson and Evergreen's lead developer presented first, outlining economic projections and job creation estimates that painted the resort as nothing short of economic salvation for the struggling agricultural community. Local business owners followed with enthusiastic endorsements. When it came time for opposing viewpoints, Caroline stepped forward. A murmur rippled through the chamber as she introduced herself. My name is Caroline Miller. Until today, most of you have never heard of me, but I am the daughter of Joseph Addison, born in 1955 during his first marriage to Rebecca Miller. The revelation caused exactly the stir she had anticipated. Council members exchanged surprised glances as Caroline calmly explained her relationship to Joseph and her legal ownership of the 40 acres containing the springs and original homestead. Olivia followed with a presentation of their alternative development plan, her academic credentials lending weight to her economic projections. She emphasized job creation through agricultural tourism, educational programs, and sustainable farming practices. Halfway through Olivia's presentation, Kate felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She tried to ignore it, but within minutes the contractions became unmistakable. 2 months early, the baby was coming. Caroline, a retired nurse, recognized the signs immediately. Kate needs medical attention. Now, she announced, moving swiftly to Kate's side. The council meeting erupted in commotion. As they waited for the ambulance, Kate gripped Caroline's hand through increasingly painful contractions. Sweat beaded on her forehead as another wave of pain washed over her. I need to speak, Kate gasped between contractions, refusing the wheelchair Reynolds had found. Before they vote, Caroline protested, but Kate was adamant. With Caroline supporting her on one side and Olivia on the other, Kate addressed the hushed chamber. Joseph Addison understood something most of us have forgotten, she said, pausing to breathe through a contraction. Land isn't just property. Water isn't just a resource. They're legacies we hold in trust for generations yet to come. She looked directly at Richard. There are some things worth more than money, worth fighting to preserve for those who will come long after we're gone. Kate's words hung in the air as another contraction doubled her over. The paramedics arrived, guiding her onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her out, Kate caught a glimpse of Richard's face, torn between concern for her and the weight of his own financial disaster. In the tense silence that followed Kate's departure, Richard rose slowly from his seat. He stood motionless for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his face. The past weeks had been a roller coaster, the promise of financial salvation through Evergreen. Then the shock of discovering Joseph's secret daughter and the legal complications of the 40 acres, and now witnessing Kate's courage even in the midst of a medical emergency. My grandfather was a complicated man, Richard finally said, his voice steady despite his churning emotions. He kept secrets that hurt people, made choices that divided our family, but he also understood what truly matters. Richard looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of neighbors he'd known all his life. I withdraw my support for the Evergreen proposal, he announced. Some debts can't be paid with dollars. I won't sell my family's heritage or its future. The council voted 4-3 against Evergreen's zoning request, requiring further environmental impact studies before any development could proceed. Davidson stormed out of the chamber, already on his phone to Evergreen executives. The local farming families gathered around Richard, offering support and ideas for alternative solutions to his financial problems. "You did the right thing," an elderly farmer told him, clasping his shoulder. "Joseph would be proud." Hours later in the Riverdale Memorial Hospital, Kate held her newborn daughter in her arms. Though small, the baby was healthy, with a determined cry and Joseph's same thoughtful gaze. "Rebecca," Kate whispered, naming her daughter after the woman Joseph had loved and lost so many years before. Caroline and Olivia stood beside the bed, 3 generations of women connected by blood and water and stories finally told. Jamie climbed carefully onto the bed, placing a gentle kiss on his new sister's forehead, while Scout watched protectively from the floor. Richard appeared in the doorway, hesitant but resolved. "She's beautiful," he said, approaching the bed. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." "You were where you needed to be," Kate replied, understanding passing between them. "Making Grandpa Joseph proud." Richard nodded, eyes glistening. "We've got a lot of work ahead. Olivia's plan. It's going to take time and effort to implement, but the banks agreed to restructure my loans based on the conservation easement payments." He smiled, the first genuine smile Kate had seen from him in years. Turns out doing the right thing might just save us all. In the weeks that followed, news of Evergreen's failed proposal in the Addison family's alternative plan spread throughout the region. Other farming communities facing similar development pressures reached out for guidance. Environmental groups offered support and funding for the water conservation elements of the plan. The town itself divided initially. Some businesses had been counting on the resort to bring new customers. But as Olivia's Heritage Center concept developed, with its emphasis on local partnerships and sustainable tourism, most came to see it as a more stable, long-term solution than the corporate resort would have been. "It's not just about saving one farm," Olivia explained to the local newspaper. "It's about redefining our relationship with the land and water that sustains us all." 1 month after baby Rebecca's birth, they gathered at the family cemetery on the original homestead. Kate held her daughter while Jamie placed a small stone on Joseph's grave, a Jewish tradition Olivia had taught him, explaining that while flowers fade, stones endure, just like memory. Together they read the final letter Joseph had left for Kate, discovered in his desk at the old homestead. "Katie, dear, sometimes our greatest losses lead to our most precious gifts. You have found not only my secret, but a new family. Care for each other and protect the springs, the true soul of this land. With boundless love, Joseph." As the afternoon light filtered through the ancient trees, casting dappled shadows across generations of Addison gravestones, Kate felt a sense of completion. The inheritance Joseph had left wasn't land or money, but something far more valuable: truth, family, and a legacy of stewardship that would continue through her children and beyond. Caroline wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, watching Jamie chase butterflies between the gravestones. "Joseph would have loved seeing this," she said softly, "all of us together at last." Richard nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think he planned it this way all along." The old fox knew exactly what he was doing, forcing us to look beyond our immediate concerns to something larger. Kate smiled down at baby Rebecca, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "He taught me that water connects everything, past, present, and future. It's never truly gone, just changing form, continuing its journey." The springs bubbled nearby, water flowing as it had for centuries, carrying stories from the past into an uncertain but hopeful future.